your entire Postgres data center just down because it could be a reason of your hardware failure, manual intervention, or due to the because of that entire cluster is down. Your primary is unavailable so that your applications are waiting and your recovery plan is now under pressure. Patroni as exactly uses the standby cluster, which gives you the controlled disaster recovery site with a continuous replication, which holds the own leader election and a clean path to promotion when it most. So, what exactly happened? Assume that around 2 a.m., most of the teams handle the disaster recovery after the thought. They rely on manual scripts, shell hacks, and at somebody scrambling at 2 a.m. to promote a replica cluster under a stress that may work in your lab environment. But when it comes to the production, it actually down. What you need to do in order to do that? Patroni is a fully managed cluster which handles the failover scenarios on its own without any manual intervention. That's why Patroni has a built-in feature called standby cluster. Called this is a cascading replication across data centers. The standby cluster run its own leader election, which means the standby cluster having the etcd groups separately on the node. The standby is still following the current primary. Here is the part most people will miss. There is a few configuration we have to modify it. That is, if you silently leave that, which makes the your cluster is too different without knowing that your primary DC and DR won't be synced. So let's see the what are the things you need to do. So as a DC environment, you have to maintain the 3 node etcd cluster along with the patroni nodes. So the recommended thing is you have to maintain at least 3 nodes from your DC side because all the HH is required 3 node cluster when it comes to the automatic failover. So why we require a 3 node etcd nodes? As a etcd documentation, you have to maintain the -1 divided by 2 when you are having a 3 node cluster, for example. So as per the formula, still you have the one. The formula you have to maintain at least 3 nodes in the etcd nodes. So what etcd nodes will do? The etcd nodes would hold the record of each and every cluster about who is the current leader and who has to follow that current leader. When it comes to the standby cluster, your etcd should be separate from your DC and DR environment because in case of, as I mentioned earlier, the 2 a.m. entire site has been down without etcd, that still if you have the standby cluster which cannot take any decision on it. So that's why you require a dedicated etcd on the standby cluster side. So how it will works, so you can know about that it will continuously replicate that which you can assume that it's a cascading replication. Cascading replication in the sense, what will happen, it will copy the data simultaneously from A to B to C, right? Similar way here, the standby leader also work from your current primary to over here. So if in case you are maintaining a two more standby also, so which act as a dear standby cluster, you can assume that standby leader got failure, again that election will happen, then new leader would be promoted, which is a difference of single cluster, which means uh, you mean to say one site of cluster and standby cluster. So the control plan would be like a single global quorum, which means so the DC site only having the etcd nodes, the DR site doesn't have the etcd nodes. So what will happen when the site of DC node has been totally down, your DR still waiting to get the details of etcd, so that it cannot promote himself as a leader, still it act as a replica cluster only. Okay, so that's why we have to keep the global quorum independently to the DC side at the DR side as well. Latency of impact is extremely high because you are doing it, but when it comes to the standby, which is low impact and raise, so due to the network glitch, if your nodes are cannot able to get that communicated, so if it's only single cluster, so etcd and patronic cluster having any port has been blocked due to your network changes and the port has been blocked, it cannot able to communicate it. But when you have the DR side, you can easily reroute your traffic. And also the failover mechanism, so for example, you have the only one side, so you have to wait until the site has to be recovered or restored. But in case if you have the DR site, you can easily route to the traffic on your standby side, so which helps to improve your recovery time. And the visibility is, you can see the all the nodes on the cluster when you are executing patroni list command, you can see the all the nodes which part of your cluster, that details you are able to see. The clusters are invisible to each other, which means, so for example, you have a DC site and DR site, so which are as a logically it is a one single architecture, but when you execute the list command, it will show the number of nodes on the DC side only. You want to see the DR side, you have to execute once again the command of list, which shows the DR side nodes at the DR end. So how to configure it? There is a simple command. So what you have to do on your patroni.yml, whichever node you are going to configure it. So at that YAML side, you have to add this number of lines. So what is this? This is the standby cluster, and the host has to point out your current primary and the port as well, and the slot should be mentioned because this cluster requires the slot. If the slot is not there, then it could be not replicating properly. And the create replica method, by default we are using the base backup. In other HL tools, you have to manually take a copy of base backup and you have to build the server, and you have to make it as a standby DR. But when it comes to the patroni, if you mention the replica method as base backup, which automatically perform a PG based backup and creating a standby cluster. So the nodes has been different from DC and DR as well. The slot should be very much important. And also you can see that you cannot use the same name, but if you are going to use the same name, you should use the cluster name as being different. Because of the name collection, what will happen, it will compromise the error, it will compromise your primary cluster, and which already up and running. I am going to add the third node in my cluster. So this is my 3 node patroni cluster. So how you would verify the patroni which is running or not. So there are a couple of ways. You can just see the patroni.ctl -c. So -c is you are mentioning the configuration file, and patroni.yml and list. So when it comes to the list, it will show the number of nodes as a part of your cluster. So this is the cluster name, and these are the members, which means you can keep it whatever the name. This name is unique, and the role is when it comes to the other HA tools, it will say primary, but when it comes to the patroni, it will say as a leader and replica. So you can see that the state, which is the latest version of patroni, you can see that state as well, which is showing the running. When it comes to the replica, which would say the streaming, and TL, which points out to the timeline. So which timeline which is running on the nodes. So in the other HA tool, what you have to do, you have to go internally and verify the PG control data to get the details. But when it comes to the patroni, this timeline is will show as the part of your list command. And lag, in case due to your network glitch, or if you are performing a bulk data in session, at the time if your standby is lagging to sync with your primary, that time you can able to see the lag over here. And this clone is points to, so when you are trying to take a backup, so if you want just to take from the primary only, then you can mention this parameter, else you can just set it as a false. Next step is nothing like that. You have to add the patroni.yml. So here the scope is very much important. The scope is nothing like that. You are mentioning the cluster name, okay, because you cannot add the standby cluster as a part of this one, because in case of the site has been down, you are unable to get the viability, right? That's why you have to keep the unique cluster name. So the unique cluster name where you will configure in the scope. The scope you can provide anything. So for reference, I just mentioned as a my patroni cluster standby. My DC site is my patroni cluster, okay. And second thing is update the details. So what is the current primary over here? The primary IP is 13, right? So I need to go here. You have to go here. Just make sure you are providing the exact IP, right? And the slot name should be anything is fine. Right now I have provided the pattern, right? So now I have added this detail, okay. So let me start systems detail start patroni. So you can see here our current timeline was 34 when I started the cluster of the standby cluster patroni services, which already inherited, which means it created a PG based backup, and it started recovering or rebuilding the node from the current primary. So that you can see the role, it's a standby leader. If you, even though if you are adding a more cluster as part of this particular standby, those nodes will be part of this particular node, okay. And which is in archive recovery, which is fine, but you cannot see any lag. In case of lag is the, you can see those informations. State is archive recovery because the standby is recovering from the primary, so which is not going to impact everything. Whatever the data which is present on the primary, which means primary leader node, those data would be available on the standby side as well. So I have explained how to configure a standby cluster creation in Patroni setup. If you get a knowledge through this video, for more videos like that, you can subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching.